chose to do my art project on Georges Seurat's A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jatte. This is a celebrated painting for many reasons. This particular painting was the driving force behind the popularization of pointillism as well as neo-impressionism. To create this masterpiece, Seurat utilized many of the elements of design as well as the principles of design, namely form, texture, and balance. A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jatte is a historical piece done by Georges Seurat in the 1880s. This painting was actually done between two sessions. He initially began the painting in May of 1884 and finished the first segment in March of 1885. Only a few months later, Seurat began his second segment in October of 1885 and continued to work diligently until the painting was finished in May of 1886. This painting depicts a French island that was frequented by many upper-middle-class Parisians. It is important to note the changes that were occurring in France during this time period. France's prosperous stance allowed for a larger focus on the arts. France was also beginning to expand their railroad system and put more of an influence on education. Despite France's financial situation at the time, this piece was not commissioned. Instead, it was displayed in the 8th Impressionism exhibition. A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jatte was Seurat's largest and most popular piece. It is 7 feet by 10 feet. While much larger works have been created today, this was quite the impressive feat during the 1880s. This is especially impressive when one is made aware that Seurat made nearly all of his initial sketches at the park. Once Seurat returned to his studio to create the final painting, he utilized oil paints as well as an interesting new technique. He believed that using small multicolored dots in his painting would allow for more definition in his forms. He was able to prove this theory true and eventually sparked an interest in this technique. This is now referred to as pointillism. Despite his use of an avant-garde technique, he still painted a 2D representational piece, which was much more common during this time period. The subject matter is also important to note, and the main focus of the painting is the young girl in the center. The placement of the child is the first clue as to what the emphasis of the painting is. The artist has also utilized directional forces to point out the focus of the painting. Many of the figures in the painting are looking towards the young girl. In my opinion, the most creative way that Seurat showed the emphasis of the painting was the lighting. While all of the other figures in the painting are cast in some sort of shadow, created by either the umbrellas, their trees, or other figures, the little girl is cast in a bright light. The other figures in the painting, as well as the trees, serve as a subordination to the young girl. Seurat's decisive techniques are also shown in the use of elements of design. For instance, he used contour lines to create the basic shapes of the people, although he mainly focused on his dots. Additionally, it is interesting to note that although Seurat used many organic shapes, he was still able to maintain the rigidity of the piece through the muted tones. The use of low contrast also aided in the more subtlety. In addition to Seurat's subtlety, he was also focused on his representational approach. To achieve this, he utilized his dotting technique and adjusted the shade or the tint of the dots, as well as the placement, to give the illusion of shadows and highlights, as well as different textures throughout the piece. The last element of design that Seurat used to create the motionlessness in the piece was the color. He used more neutral and earth tones to create a sense of calm when viewing the piece. Many of these elements of design go hand in hand with the principles of design. The principles of design are more abstract ideas than the elements of design. However, they are no less integral to the piece and typically correlate. The first element of design is unity versus variety. In this particular piece, he chose to focus mainly on unity. He chose to do this through the use of various hues. Several of the colors are repeated throughout. For instance, the muted orange color is repeated on many of the outfits found on the women. Additionally, he also utilized low contrast hues to further emphasize the stillness of the piece. Seurat also carefully planned where each figure would be placed so that the painting would be balanced. He utilized the shapes to accomplish this. By strategically placing each figure in a place that would balance the other figure on the other side of the canvas, he was able to accomplish balance in this massive piece. The particular painting was 7 foot by 10 foot, and because of this, it was nearly life-size. Despite the size of this piece, Seurat was able to ensure that each figure was proportionate. He accomplished this by painting the figures that were intended to be closer to the viewer as larger and those that were intended to be further away from the viewer as smaller. Another interesting technique that Seurat utilized was the inverted border. By inverting the border, he was able to make the image itself appear as if it was slowly becoming inverted. Each of these principles of design plays an integral role in creating certain effects and portraying a specific message to the viewer. A Sunday afternoon on the island of Le Grand Jatte, although aesthetically pleasing, carries much more weight when one looks more closely at the piece. The entire painting is pleasing. The entire painting is a commentary on the French society in this time of prosperity. This can be as subtle as the rigidity in the piece that is created through the color scheme and the lack of expression and personality assigned to the figures. Or it can be as small additions, such as the monkey that the largest figure is seen holding. These likely served as a nod to the obscene and unnecessary things that the wealthy were buying, simply because they could. However, Seurat also commented on darker topics, such as prostitution. The woman seen fishing to the left of the canvas is commonly viewed as a symbol for prostitution. This may be an indication of how exactly people were obtaining their wealth. It is likely that Seurat was accusing the upper middle class of attaining their status through immoral methods. The other common interpretation pertaining to this piece was the young girl, or the subject, which can be found in the center of the piece. Because she is standing straight at the viewer and cast in a light, many believe that she is questioning the viewer, silently asking them to do something about the things that Seurat had commented on. Of course, we will never truly understand Seurat's intentions behind this piece. He may have simply found adding a monkey to the painting humorous. However, it is interesting to speculate what he may have meant by adding these subtle details. Unfortunately, many only saw the painting at a surface level and were simply distracted by the use of the dots as opposed to brushstrokes. The title itself is very straightforward and simply descriptive of the scene. This may have contributed to the view of the painting and the lack of depth given to it. The paintings and other forms can be evaluated on many levels, and unfortunately, many did not look far enough into the true meaning of this piece. Some ways a piece may be evaluated is through the formal theory, the contextual theory, or the expressive theory. The formal theory focuses mainly on the techniques and the elements of design utilized by the artist, while the contextual theory focuses on the intentions and the purpose of the purpose of the art. Finally, the expressive theory applies mainly to the emotions the piece elicits. According to Feldman's methods of art criticism, there are seven things that should be considered when analyzing an art piece based on the formal theory. The first item that this is mentioned is proportionality. Seurat was aiming for a realistic piece, and he was able to accomplish this by creating accurate proportions across all of the figures. Another thing Feldman mentions is the unity in the piece. Throughout this particular piece, Seurat maintains a particular color scheme to create the sense of unity. Ultimately, an art piece is considered a masterpiece when using the formal theory has technical aspects as well as visual organization. This piece is a great example of that. He utilized nearly every element of design while creating a cohesive piece that is also aesthetically pleasing, while having a deeper meaning. This deeper meaning is also analyzed using the contextual theory. Feldman's methods of art criticism pertaining to the contextual theory begin by stating that the art should serve humanity in one way or another. In this case, Seurat created the painting to bring awareness to the faults of the upper middle class that were frequently overlooked. Feldman also mentions that an exceptional piece of art extends the meaning of the piece past the artists themselves. Seurat accomplished this by once again commenting on the upper middle class. The final theory of art criticism is the expressive theory. The two most basic rules for judging a piece based on this theory are that the piece has the greatest possible capability to elicit emotions and to convey a message. A Sunday afternoon on the island of Le Grand Jatte is able to fulfill both of these requirements. Because of the rigidity and stillness in the painting, it is able to elicit a calm feeling in the viewer. Additionally, we assume today that Seurat included several examples of symbolism in this piece to bring attention to the faults of the growing upper middle class. The most relevant theory would be the contextual theory. While we can deduce that the artist was commenting on the lifestyle of the upper middle class, that would be impossible to do without the knowledge of this time period. Contextual theory mainly focuses on the purpose of the piece, that the piece serves. In this case, it would be a commentary. The painting does elicit emotions as well as utilizing technical skills, but the most prominent part of the piece is the meaning behind it. Overall, A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte is a timeless piece that is not only aesthetically pleasing, but also well done and meaningful. Seurat utilized many elements and principles of design to further portray this message to his viewers. As purposeful as all of Seurat's choices were, one can not only help but notice the painting is also very beautiful. A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte has been analyzed and highly regarded for decades, as it will be for centuries to come.